Sometimes people struggle with whether or not they're even hearing God speak, and they ask themselves, how do I know this is God? How do I know this is not me or my flesh speaking? You know, God speaks to all of us in many ways, different ways. He speaks through His Word. He speaks through the still small voice in our hearts. He speaks to us through our circumstances. But how do you know that you know that you know? How are you sure? I suggest to you that you're never really sure. You never know for certain unless God speaks to you in an audible voice or writes with a finger of fire like He did in front of Nebuchadnezzar. And that's why God expects us to live by faith, to act in obedience by faith. One definition I have about faith is this: faith is action in obedience to our perceived will of God. So what does that mean? Faith is action in obedience to our perception, our understanding, our belief of God's will. You know what action is. Action is simple. It means to act, to do something. Obedience means to follow what someone tells you to do. Perceived will of God. Boy, that's another thing. How do we perceive the will of God? Again, through reading His Word, by allowing Him to speak to us through His Word, through the still small voice of God in our spirit, through circumstances. But we still never know for sure. If God were to come to you physically and speak to you audibly and tell you to do something, it would require your obedience, not your faith. Your choice would be simple. Do you do or don't you do what God came and told you to do? There's no faith involved in that. Only obedience or disobedience. Remember when we talked about God as our Heavenly Father? Let me share with you this. Barbara and I raised our children in a particular way. When we told them or asked them to do something and they did it, they were being obedient. That's pretty simple. And when they didn't do what they were asked to do, they were being disobedient. Their obedience resulted in our blessing, our favor, our approval. Their disobedience resulted in our disapproval, resulted in correction and discipline. Now, how do you react to your children if they did a certain thing that you asked them not to do, and they did it anyhow? I suggest as a good parent, your responsibility is first to find out why. Why didn't they do what you asked? Or on the other hand, why did they do what you asked them not to do? You know, as a parent, if you discover that they were doing exactly what they thought you had asked them, I don't think you can correct or punish or discipline their behavior. Why? Because they were doing what they thought you asked. In other words, in their mind, they were being obedient. If on the other hand, you were to find out that they were deliberately disobeying you, they were rebellious, then yes, it's your responsibility as a parent to bring correction and discipline to their behavior. I believe God is the same way with us. If we're deliberately disobedient, then there's consequences, negative ones. If on the other hand, we come to Him and we say, I was doing what I thought you were asking, then God does what a good earthly father should do. He says to us, no, that's not what I asked you to do. Let me help you understand what I asked you to do. But because you were doing what you thought I had asked, I'm not going to punish you or discipline you. But I need you to help. I need to help you understand what I was asking. God goes one step further than our natural earthly fathers. He rewards our obedience. He rewards our faith. That's how I believe faith works. It's being obedient to what we sincerely think or believe in our hearts God is asking. And as long as we do that, God looks at your behavior, right or wrong, and He says, you honored me. Why? Because you were doing what you thought was right. You were doing what you thought He was asking you to do. As a parent, you can't discipline or punish your children when they're doing what they thought was right. It's going to teach them a completely wrong lesson. And God's the same way with us. Not only does He not punish us and discipline us for wrong choices that we make in faith, believing that it was the right thing to do, but He's going to reward you even for your wrong decisions by counting them as righteousness when they're made from the right heart. Why? Because you acted in faith, because you were obedient to what you perceived His will to be, and God lays that to your account as righteousness. Tomorrow we'll explore more keys to receiving His favor in your life.